My daughter said, "You're not coming to my wedding." I smiled and called. You know that feeling when your entire world collapses in a single sentence? When the person you sacrificed everything for looks you dead in the eye and tells you that you don't matter anymore? That's exactly what happened to me 3 months ago. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Sometimes it's the only way to see clearly who's been pushing you down all along. My name is Trevor, and this is the story of how my daughter's wedding became the stage for the most calculated revenge I've ever executed. Let me take you back to where it all started, because understanding my story requires knowing the foundation that crumbled beneath my feet. 28 years ago, I married a woman named Patricia. She was beautiful, charming, and came from what everyone considered a respectable family. Her parents owned a successful chain of boutique hotels across the East Coast, and Patricia had grown up accustomed to a certain lifestyle. I was a young architect, ambitious and hardworking, with big dreams but limited means at the time. Our daughter, Melissa, was born 2 years into our marriage. From the moment I held her in my arms, I knew that everything I did from that point forward would be for her. She was perfect, this tiny human with Patricia's green eyes and my stubborn chin. I remember thinking that I would move mountains to give her the best life possible. Little did I know how literally I would end up doing exactly that. The early years were challenging but happy. I worked insane hours, taking on every project I could to build my reputation and grow my architectural firm. Patricia stayed home with Melissa, and I thought we were building something beautiful together. A family, a future, a legacy. I was so focused on providing, on creating stability, that I missed the signs. Or maybe I chose not to see them. Looking back now, I realized that Patricia's resentment started much earlier than I ever acknowledged. By the time Melissa turned 10, my firm had taken off. We weren't just comfortable anymore, we were wealthy. I had landed several major commercial projects, and my designs were being featured in architectural magazines. We moved into a stunning home that I had designed myself, a modern masterpiece overlooking the bay. I was so proud to give my family everything they could ever want. But here's what I didn't understand then. Sometimes giving people everything means they start to feel entitled to it, and they forget who made it all possible. Patricia changed as our wealth grew. Or maybe she just became more of who she always was, and I finally had to notice. She became obsessed with social status, with being seen at the right events, with making sure everyone knew we belonged to the upper echelons of society. She joined exclusive clubs, organized charity galas, and surrounded herself with people whose primary credentials seemed to be the size of their bank accounts. I didn't mind. I thought she deserved to enjoy the fruits of our success. Melissa, my beautiful daughter, was growing up in this world of privilege. I made sure she had the best education money could buy: private schools, music lessons, art classes, summer camps in Europe, every ballet recital, every school play, every achievement. I was there. Even when I had major client meetings or project deadlines, I rearranged everything to be present for my daughter. Patricia often couldn't make it, too busy with her social commitments, but I always found a way. When Melissa was 15, something shifted in our family dynamic. She started spending more time with Patricia's side of the family, particularly her grandmother, Victoria. Victoria was the matriarch of Patricia's family, a cold, calculating woman who had never thought I was good enough for her daughter. She tolerated me because of the lifestyle I could provide, but she made it clear through subtle jabs and backhanded compliments that she considered me beneath them. New money versus old money, she once said at a dinner party, as if there's any real difference when you're trying to buy respect. I noticed Melissa starting to adopt some of Victoria's attitudes, little comments here and there about people who were trying too hard, about the difference between earned wealth and inherited class. It bothered me, but I told myself it was just a teenage phase. She'd grow out of it. Besides, she still seemed to love me. She'd still hug me when I came home from work, still ask for my advice on school projects, still want me to drive her to meet her friends. The real trouble started when Melissa went to college. She chose a prestigious university on the East Coast, the same one Patricia and her family had attended. I was proud of her naturally, but I also felt a distance growing between us. She came home less frequently, and when she did, she seemed different. More polished, more refined, more like Patricia's family and less like the girl who used to help me in my home office, fascinated by my architectural sketches. During her junior year, Melissa started dating someone. His name was Thornton Ashworth III. Yes, you heard that right, the third. He came from old money, the kind of family that had their wealth so long they'd forgotten it was ever earned by someone. His great-great-grandfather had made a fortune in railroads, and the family had been living off that legacy ever since. Thornton himself had never worked a real job in his life, bouncing from one trust fund hobby to another, calling himself an entrepreneur while his family's money funded his failures. Patricia was thrilled about Melissa's relationship with Thornton. Absolutely thrilled. She threw dinner parties to welcome him into our family, bragged about him to her friends, treated him like he was royalty. I tried to be supportive, I really did. But something about Thornton rubbed me the wrong way. He had this air of superiority, this assumption that everything should be handed to him because of who his family was. He looked down on anyone who actually had to work for a living, and I caught him more than once making dismissive comments about people in service positions. I attempted to connect with him, man to man. I invited him to my office to show him some of my projects, thinking maybe he'd be interested in the work I did. He showed up 40 minutes late, spent the entire time on his phone, and barely glanced at the architectural models I'd spent hours preparing to show him. When I tried to explain the concept behind one of my award-winning designs, he interrupted me to take a call about his tennis lesson. That's when I started to see what this relationship meant. Melissa wasn't dating Thornton because of who he was as a person. She was dating him because of what he represented, but I held my tongue. I didn't want to be the overbearing father who disapproved of his daughter's choices. I wanted Melissa to be happy, and if Thornton made her happy, I would learn to accept him. I kept telling myself that maybe I was being too harsh, too judgmental. Maybe I was projecting my own insecurities about coming from a working-class background. Then came the engagement. Melissa was 25, just graduated from business school, and Thornton proposed during a family vacation in the Maldives. A vacation that I, of course, had paid for. The proposal itself was elaborate. He'd arranged for a private beach dinner, musicians, photographers, the works, all funded by his trust fund, naturally. When they came back and showed us the ring, a massive diamond that probably cost more than most people's cars, Patricia cried tears of joy. I hugged my daughter and told her I was happy for her, and I meant it. I wanted her to be happy, even if I had reservations about her choice. The wedding planning started immediately. Patricia and Melissa threw themselves into it with an intensity I'd never seen. They hired a celebrity wedding planner, the kind you see in magazines. The budget kept escalating. Venue costs, dress designers, floral arrangements, a 12-piece orchestra, celebrity chef for the catering. Every time I saw another invoice, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Not because of the money, I had plenty, but because of what it all represented. I was paying for everything, of course. Thornton's family had offered to contribute, but their definition of contribution was providing the rehearsal dinner. Meanwhile, I was writing checks that would have bought several houses. But I didn't complain. This was my daughter's wedding, and I wanted it to be perfect for her. If this was what she wanted, this extravagant display of wealth and status, then I would give it to her. But here's where things started to feel wrong. As the planning progressed, I noticed I was being increasingly left out of decisions. When I'd ask about the guest list or the venue or the menu, Patricia and Melissa would exchange glances and tell me not to worry about it, that they had everything under control. When I suggested inviting some of my colleagues and old friends, people who had been part of my journey to success, Melissa would wrinkle her nose and say they were trying to keep the guest list refined. Refined. That word started appearing a lot in conversations. The wedding needed to be refined. The guest list needed to be refined. The whole aesthetic needed to be refined. What they meant, though I didn't fully understand it then, was that they wanted to erase any evidence of where we'd come from, any reminder that our wealth was earned rather than inherited. 3 months before the wedding, I was sitting in my home office reviewing the latest round of invoices when Melissa came in. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her engagement ring, avoiding eye contact. I remember feeling a sense of dread even before she spoke, a father's intuition maybe, knowing that whatever she was about to say would hurt. She sat down across from my desk and took a deep breath. Then she said the words that would change everything. "Dad, I need to talk to you about the wedding. Thornton's family has some concerns about the guest experience, and we've had to make some difficult decisions about the wedding party and the seating arrangements. We've been working with a family integration specialist, and they've advised us that having too many different social dynamics might create tension. So, we've decided that it would be better if you didn't attend the ceremony. I sat there completely frozen. Surely I had misheard her. My own daughter, the child I had sacrificed everything for, the person whose entire life I had funded and supported, was telling me I couldn't come to her wedding, the wedding I was paying for. Found my voice, though it came out strangled. "You're telling me I can't come to your wedding?" My daughter looked at the floor. "It's not that we don't want you there, it's just Thornton's family has certain expectations, and you know how they are about maintaining a certain atmosphere. Your side of the family, they're wonderful people, but they're just different. It would be easier for everyone if we kept the event more cohesive." The room started to spin. I gripped the edge of my desk, trying to process what I was hearing. "Let me get this straight. I've paid for everything. The venue, the dress, the flowers, the food, the band, everything. I've written checks totaling more than most people make in a decade. And now you're telling me I'm not allowed to attend because I'm not refined enough for Thornton's family?" Melissa's face flushed with anger, and I saw a glimpse of something I'd never seen in my daughter before. Contempt. "This is exactly the kind of reaction we were worried about," she snapped. "You're making this about you and your ego instead of about what's best for my special day. Thornton and I have worked very hard to create the perfect wedding, and we can't have that ruined by family drama." "Family drama," I repeated slowly. "Wanting to attend my own daughter's wedding is family drama." She stood up abruptly. "I knew you'd react this way. This is why we waited to tell you. You've always been so sensitive about where we came from, so insecure about not having the same background as Thornton's family. But this isn't about you, Dad. This is my wedding, and I get to decide who attends. And quite frankly, your presence would make certain guests uncomfortable." Something inside me broke in that moment. Not just my heart, though that was definitely shattering, but something deeper, an illusion I'd been clinging to for years. The illusion that the sacrifices I'd made meant something, that the life I'd built for my family had created a bond that couldn't be broken. I realized, sitting there in my office, looking at my daughter who had become a stranger, that I had lost her long ago. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I took a slow breath and something strange happened. I felt a calmness wash over me, the kind of cold clarity that comes when you finally stop fighting reality and accept it for what it is. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and I saw Patricia. I saw Victoria. I saw every person who had ever looked down on me for having the audacity to earn my success rather than inherit it. And I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who has just realized he's been playing a game where the rules were rigged against him from the start. It was the smile of someone who has decided that if he's going to lose, he's going to do it on his own terms. Melissa seemed taken aback by my reaction. She'd probably expected anger, tears, pleading, but I just smiled and said in a perfectly calm voice, "All right. If that's your decision, I'll respect it." She blinked, clearly surprised. "You will?" I nodded. "You're an adult. It's your wedding. You get to make these choices." She looked almost disappointed, like she'd been gearing up for a fight and I'd deflated her entire argument. "Oh, well, good. Thank you for understanding." She turned to leave and I called after her. "Melissa?" She paused at the door. "One question. Does your mother know about this decision?" My daughter had the decency to look slightly ashamed. It was her idea. Thornton's mother and grandmother Victoria all agreed that it would be better this way. They're the ones who hired the family integration specialist. Of course they were. I smiled again. "Thank you for your honesty." Melissa left, and I sat there in the silence of my office, the room I'd designed myself, in the house I'd built with my own vision and hard work. And then I picked up my phone. The first call I made was to Richard Harrison, my attorney. Richard had been my lawyer for 15 years, handling everything from my business contracts to my estate planning. He was also one of my closest friends, one of the few people I trusted completely. When he answered, I spoke without preamble. "Richard, I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring everything related to my financial accounts, my properties, and most importantly, my estate planning documents. We're going to make some major changes." Richard, to his credit, didn't ask questions. He just said, "I'll be there at 9. Should I be worried?" I looked at the family photo on my desk. taken just 2 years ago, all of us smiling on a beach vacation, another vacation I'd paid for. You're not the one who should be worried, I replied. The second call I made was to my accountant, Margaret Chen. Margaret was brilliant, meticulous, and had managed my finances with exceptional skill for over a decade. She knew every asset I owned, every investment I'd made, every dollar I'd earned. Margaret, I said when she answered, I need a complete audit of every financial contribution I've made to Patricia and Melissa over the past 10 years. Every check, every payment, every gift. Can you have that ready by tomorrow afternoon? There was a pause, then Margaret's professional voice. Trevor, that's going to be a substantial document. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I also need you to prepare documentation showing my projected net worth with and without certain ongoing expenses. She was quiet for a moment, then said, I'll have everything ready. Are you okay? No, Margaret, but I will be. The third call I made was to James Peterson, my business partner. James and I had founded our architectural firm together 20 years ago. He was more than a partner. He was like a brother to me. When he picked up, I could hear noise in the background. His kids playing, his wife laughing. The sound of a happy family. It made my chest ache. James, I need you to buy me out. The background noise stopped abruptly. What? You heard me. I want you to buy out my share of the firm. We can structure it however you want, but I need this to happen quickly, within the next month if possible. Trevor, what the hell is going on? Are you sick? Did something happen? I rubbed my face, suddenly exhausted. Something happened, but I can't talk about it right now. I just need you to trust me. This is what I want. Can you do it? There was a long silence. Then James said, You know I can. The firm's valuation is strong, and I've been thinking about expanding my ownership anyway. But Trevor, you're scaring me. What's really going on? I'll explain everything soon. Right now, I just need to know you're with me on this. Another pause. Always, James said. I'll call my lawyer tomorrow and we'll start the paperwork. Thank you, I said, and hung up before my voice could break. The fourth and final call I made that night was the most important one. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Catherine Monroe. Catherine was a journalist, one of the best investigative reporters in the state. I'd met her years ago when she was doing a piece on ethical development practices in architecture, and we'd stayed in touch. She was brilliant, relentless, and most importantly, she had integrity. Catherine, it's Trevor. I hope I'm not calling too late. Her voice was warm and curious. Trevor, it's good to hear from you. What can I do for you? I need your help with something. It's personal, but it has broader implications about social corruption and financial exploitation. Are you interested? I heard the shift in her tone, the journalist's instinct kicking in. I'm listening. Over the next hour, I told Catherine everything. Not the revenge plan, not yet, but the broader story. How I'd built my wealth through hard work and innovation. How I'd been married into a family that valued inherited status over earned success. How I'd funded an entire lifestyle for people who now considered me an embarrassment. How my own daughter had disinvited me from her wedding because I wasn't good enough for her future husband's family. When I finished, Catherine was silent for a long moment. Then she said, Trevor, that's heartbreaking. I'm so sorry, but I can't help wondering why you're telling me this. Because, I said carefully, I think there's a larger story here about how wealth and class work in this country. About how people who inherit money look down on people who earn it, even though the earners are the ones creating actual value. I think it's a story worth telling, and you want me to tell it. Eventually, yes, but not yet. First, I need to do some things, make some moves, and when the time is right, I'll give you exclusive access to the whole story. Documents, financial records, everything. In return, I just need you to be ready to publish when I give you the signal. Catherine was quiet again, thinking. This is about the wedding, isn't it? You're planning something. I'm planning to tell the truth, I said. That's all, just the truth. She laughed softly. The truth can be the most devastating weapon of all. When do you need me ready? I'll let you know. It won't be long. After I hung up, I sat in my office for hours, thinking and planning. By the time the sun started to rise, I had a complete strategy mapped out. It was elegant, proportional, and most importantly, it would give everyone exactly what they deserved. The next morning, Richard arrived at 9 sharp, carrying his briefcase and wearing an expression of concern. I offered him coffee, which he accepted, and we sat down in my office. Before he could ask questions, I laid it out for him. I want to change my will and estate planning documents. Effective immediately, Patricia and Melissa are to receive nothing from me. Not upon my death, not as gifts, nothing. Richard set down his coffee cup carefully. Trevor, I understand you're upset, but making major estate changes in an emotional state isn't usually wise. I held up a hand. I'm not emotional. I'm clear-headed for the first time in years. Let me explain what's happening, and then you can advise me accordingly. I told him about the wedding situation, about the years of subtle dismissal, about realizing that I'd been funding people who viewed me as inferior. When I finished, Richard leaned back in his chair and whistled softly. That's cold, even for people I usually defend. But here's my concern. If you cut them off completely right now, they'll know something's wrong. They'll prepare, protect themselves. You want this to have maximum impact, correct? I nodded. Exactly. So here's what I propose, Richard continued, warming to the strategy. We change your will and all estate documents now, completely cutting out Patricia and Melissa, but we keep it confidential. They won't know until it matters. Meanwhile, we set up a separate trust for any charitable organizations you want to support. Then, he continued, his eyes gleaming with the kind of strategic thinking that made him such a good attorney, we let them continue thinking everything is fine. You keep paying for the wedding, keep maintaining the status quo. Let them have their perfect day, thinking they've gotten away with it. And then, after the wedding, you file for divorce. I'd been considering divorce, but hearing Richard say it out loud made it real. Patricia will be entitled to half of everything in the divorce, I pointed out. Richard smiled. Not exactly. You've been married for 28 years, so normally, yes, she'd be entitled to half. But if I can prove financial misconduct, excessive spending without your consent, or misrepresentation of assets, we can argue for a different split. Plus, I happen to know that you've kept most of your major assets in your business accounts and trusts that were established before the marriage. He pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. We'll need to document everything. Every payment you've made for the wedding. Every expense Patricia has charged without your explicit approval. Every gift given to Melissa. We'll build a case that shows you've been financially supporting a lifestyle based on false pretenses. What false pretenses? I asked, though I was starting to see where he was going. The pretense of a loving family, Richard said bluntly. The pretense that Patricia and Melissa valued you as a person and not just as a bank account. The pretense that you were building a life together when, in reality, they were extracting resources while planning to exclude you from major family events. It's not criminal, but it's certainly relevant to divorce proceedings. We spent the next 3 hours going through every document, every account, every asset. Richard drafted new estate documents that would leave my entire fortune to various charities and causes I believed in. Architectural education funds, scholarships for students from working-class backgrounds, housing initiatives for low-income families. Patricia and Melissa would get nothing. Margaret arrived in the afternoon with a document that was over 200 pages long. It detailed every payment I'd made to or for Patricia and Melissa over the past decade. The number at the bottom made even Richard whistle. Over the past 10 years, you've given them $12.7 million. That's not counting the house, the cars, or other assets, just direct payments, gifts, and expenses. I stared at the number, feeling a mix of shock and vindication. $12.7 million. And they couldn't even let me attend the wedding. Margaret flipped through the pages. The wedding alone is currently at $1.2 million and counting. The dress was $80,000. The flowers are costing more than most people's weddings in their entirety. You're paying for everyone's travel, accommodations, and I see here that you even paid for Thornton's family's pre-wedding vacation to Tuscany. She looked up at me with something like anger in her usually professional expression. Trevor, I've managed finances for a lot of wealthy families, but I've never seen someone so thoroughly taken advantage of by their own family. This isn't just spending. This is exploitation. I need copies of everything, I said. Multiple copies. Richard needs them for the divorce proceedings, and I need them for something else. Over the next 2 months, I played my role perfectly. I smiled. I wrote checks. I pretended everything was fine. Patricia and Melissa never suspected a thing. Why would they? I'd always been compliant, always given them what they wanted. always played the part of the grateful husband and father, lucky to be accepted by such refined people. I attended the final venue walkthrough, even though Melissa looked uncomfortable having me there. I reviewed the menu selections, even though my opinion was clearly not wanted. I signed off on the photographer, the videographer, the wedding planner's final invoices. Every single thing they asked for, I provided. And I documented everything, but I also made other preparations. I met with Catherine 3 more times, providing her with documents, financial records, and context. She was building a story, one that would be published the week after the wedding. A story about old money versus new, about families that valued status over character, about a system that perpetuated inequality by making people who earned their wealth feel inferior to those who simply inherited it. I also quietly started separating my assets from Patricia's access, not in any way she would notice, just making sure that when I filed for divorce, I'd have control over my own finances. Richard assured me everything was airtight. The prenup we'd signed 28 years ago was still valid, and with the evidence we'd gathered of financial misconduct, he was confident we could minimize what Patricia would receive in the settlement. 2 weeks before the wedding, Thornton's family hosted the rehearsal dinner. As agreed, they were paying for it, and they'd chosen one of the most exclusive country clubs in the state. I wasn't invited to the rehearsal itself, of course, just the dinner. When I asked Melissa about it, she'd given me a look of such pity and said, "Dad, you wouldn't understand the ceremony planning anyway. It's very traditional, very formal. We're keeping it to the wedding party and immediate family." Immediate family. I was paying for the entire wedding, but I wasn't considered immediate family. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. The rehearsal dinner was exactly what I expected. Thornton's family had invited about 50 people, all from their social circle. Old money, every single one of them. People whose great-grandparents had been wealthy, who'd never worked a real job in their lives, who viewed success as something you were born into rather than something you achieved. I arrived alone. Patricia had gone early with Melissa to help with last-minute preparations. I was directed to a table at the side of the room, seated with some distant relatives of Thornton's family that I'd never met. No one at my table spoke to me beyond basic pleasantries. I might as well have been invisible. I watched Patricia across the room, laughing with Victoria and Thornton's mother, fitting in perfectly with the old money crowd. I watched Melissa, radiant in her rehearsal dinner dress that had cost more than my first car, moving through the crowd like she'd been born to this world. And I realized that she had been born to it, in a way, born to a world I'd created with my money, then been told I wasn't good enough to enter. Thornton's father gave a speech about family legacy and maintaining traditions. Victoria gave a speech about Melissa being the perfect addition to their family, someone who understood the importance of refinement and class. Patricia gave a speech about how proud she was of her daughter for making such an excellent match. No one mentioned me, not once. The man paying for the wedding, the man who had made all of this possible, might as well not have existed. I sat through the entire dinner with a smile on my face. I applauded at the right moments. I even congratulated Thornton when he approached my table briefly, though his handshake was limp and his attention was clearly elsewhere. And through it all, I felt that cold clarity, that absolute certainty that what I was planning was not just justified but necessary. The week before the wedding, I made my final preparations. I met with Richard one last time to review everything. The divorce papers were prepared and ready to file the day after the wedding. The estate documents had been changed and filed. My business buyout with James was nearly complete, which would give me liquid assets that Patricia couldn't touch. Everything was in place. I also met with Catherine for the last time. She showed me a draft of her article, and it was perfect, thorough, well-researched, and devastating. Told the story of a self-made man who had married into a family that exploited his wealth while looking down on him for earning it. It detailed the wedding expenses, the social dynamics, the way old money gatekeeps access to certain circles while gladly taking new money's cash. She'd even gotten quotes from sociologists and economists about the class dynamics at play. The article was scheduled to run in the Sunday edition of the state's largest newspaper, 3 days after the wedding. It would also be published online and picked up by national outlets. Catherine had that kind of reach and reputation. This would be everywhere. "Trevor," she said as we finished our meeting, Are you sure you want to do this? Once this article runs, there's no going back. Your daughter will know. Your wife will know. Their entire social circle will know. I nodded. I'm sure. They made their choice. They told me I wasn't good enough to attend a wedding I paid for. Now the world gets to know exactly what kind of people they are. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Okay, I'll see you on the other side of this. The day before the wedding, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went to my daughter's house, the condo I'd bought for her as a graduation present. She seemed surprised to see me, even more surprised when I asked if we could talk. We sat in her living room, expensive furniture that I'd helped her pick out, art on the walls that I'd encouraged her to buy when she said she couldn't afford it. Melissa, I began, and something in my tone made her sit up straighter. Tomorrow is your wedding day, and I want you to know that despite everything, I do hope you'll be happy. She blinked, clearly not expecting that. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. Does it? I asked quietly. Does it really mean a lot? Because I've spent the past few months wondering what I mean to you at all. Her face flushed. Dad, please, we've been over this. I know you're upset about not being invited, but I explained the reasons. It was a sophisticated solution to a complex social situation that would have created tension and ruined the atmosphere we're trying to achieve for our special day. I held up a hand. I didn't come here to argue. I came to tell you something important. I love you. I've always loved you. Everything I've done, every hour I've worked, every sacrifice I've made, has been because I wanted to give you the best life possible. That love hasn't changed, even though I now understand that you don't feel the same way about me. That's not fair, she protested. I do love you. We have different ideas about what's appropriate, about social dynamics, about, I'm not refined enough. I finished for her. That's what you're trying to say without saying it. I'm new money. I work for a living. I came from a middle-class background, and that embarrasses you. She looked away, and her silence was answer enough. I stood up. Tomorrow, you're going to marry Thornton. You're going to have your perfect wedding, with your perfect guest list full of perfectly refined people. And I'm going to make sure you get exactly what you want. She looked up at me, confused. What do you mean? I smiled. You'll see. Congratulations on your wedding, Melissa. I hope it's everything you dreamed it would be. I left before she could respond, and I didn't look back. That night I barely slept. Not because I was anxious, but because I was going over every detail of the plan, making sure nothing could go wrong. By dawn, I was calm and ready. The wedding day arrived bright and beautiful. Perfect weather for the outdoor ceremony at the exclusive waterfront venue. I spent the morning reviewing documents one final time with Richard. Everything is ready, he confirmed. The divorce papers will be filed first thing Monday morning. Patricia will be served by noon. Your assets are protected, and the prenup we're enforcing is solid. What about Melissa? I asked. Can she contest the will change? Richard shook his head. You're alive and of sound mind. You can leave your estate to whoever you want. She has no legal claim to your assets while you're living, and after you're gone, the will is clear. She gets nothing. Everything goes to the charities and causes you've designated. I nodded, feeling a weight settle in my chest. It wasn't satisfaction exactly, more like resolution. And the wedding payments? All cleared, Richard confirmed. Every vendor has been paid in full. The venue, the caterers, the band, the photographer, everyone. They can't claim you sabotaged the event by withholding payment. You fulfilled every financial obligation you agreed to. That was important to me. I wasn't trying to ruin Melissa's wedding day itself. I wasn't that cruel. I was simply removing myself from the equation afterward. They'd have their perfect day, and then they'd discover what life looked like without me funding it. I spent the afternoon exactly as I'd planned. I went to my office and worked on a design for a community center in a low-income neighborhood, one of the projects that would be funded by my estate after I was gone. It felt good, meaningful, like I was finally putting my energy into something that mattered, something that would help people who actually needed it, not people who felt entitled to it. Around 4 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was Patricia. Her voice was sharp with irritation. Trevor, where are you? The wedding starts in 3 hours and I need you to transfer another $50,000 to the planner. Apparently there's been an issue with the champagne delivery, and they need premium replacements immediately. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the architectural drawings spread across my desk. The champagne wasn't good enough. Patricia's voice rose. Don't start. This is Melissa's wedding day. Everything needs to be perfect, and if that means spending more money to fix problems, then that's what we do. You've already spent over $1 million. What's another 50,000? You're right, I said calmly. What's another 50,000? I'll transfer it now. There was a pause, like she'd been expecting an argument and didn't know how to respond when she didn't get one. Oh, well, good. Thank you. I'll see you later then. Actually, no, you won't, I said pleasantly. I'm not attending, remember? Melissa made it very clear I'm not invited. Another pause, longer this time. Trevor, don't be dramatic. She didn't mean it like that. She just meant that you weren't needed for the ceremony itself. You're still family. Of course you can come if you want to. It's a bit late to be extending an invitation, don't you think? My voice remained pleasant, conversational. The wedding is in 3 hours. I'm sure you have everything perfectly organized without me. Patricia's voice turned cold. Fine. Be stubborn. But don't blame us when you regret missing your daughter's wedding. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. I don't think regret is going to be my problem, Patricia. Enjoy the ceremony. I'll talk to you soon. I hung up before she could respond. I transferred the $50,000 because I'd promised myself I would see this through completely. They would get their perfect wedding, fully funded, exactly as planned. What came after was when everything would change. At 6 p.m, the ceremony would have started. I sat in my office, imagining the scene. The waterfront venue I'd never been allowed to see, decorated with flowers that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The chairs arranged in perfect rows, filled with refined guests in designer clothes. The string quartet playing classical music. Melissa walking down the aisle in her $80,000 dress, Patricia crying elegant tears, Thornton looking appropriately aristocratic at the altar, and one empty space where the father of the bride should have been. Except no one would mention it. No one would acknowledge the absence. They'd all pretend it was perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable, that the man who paid for everything wasn't important enough to attend. I wondered if anyone asked where I was. I wondered if Melissa felt even a moment of doubt, a flicker of conscience. Probably not. She'd been too thoroughly convinced that she was doing the right thing, making the sophisticated choice, maintaining the proper social dynamics. At 7:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. She'd been monitoring social media, and apparently several guests were posting photos from the wedding. She sent me a few screenshots. The venue was indeed beautiful, I had to admit. Stunning, even. The floral arrangements were works of art, cascading orchids and roses in perfect color coordination. The lighting was magical, soft and romantic. It looked like something from a fairy tale. There was a photo of Melissa and Thornton at the altar, and despite everything, my heart clenched. She looked beautiful, happy, radiant. For a moment, just a moment, I questioned everything. Was I doing the right thing? Was I being too harsh? Should I just let it go, accept my role as the invisible bank account, and maintain some kind of relationship with my daughter? Then I saw another photo. It was of the seating arrangement at the reception. There was a head table with Melissa, Thornton, Patricia, Thornton's parents, and his grandparents, including Victoria. The family table, the immediate family. And I realized something that made my blood run cold. They hadn't just excluded me from the ceremony. They'd removed me from the family entirely. There was no empty chair with my name on it. No acknowledgement that I existed. They'd literally erased me from my own daughter's wedding. That's when any remaining doubt disappeared. I texted Richard a simple message. Proceed as planned. His response came immediately. Understood. Everything is ready for Monday morning. I put my phone away and sat in the silence of my office. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, and I was alone. But I wasn't lonely. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt free. Around 9 p.m, I received a call from James. He and his wife had been invited to the wedding. They moved in some of the same social circles, and they'd attended to maintain business relationships. Trevor, James said without preamble, I don't know what's going on between you and your family, but I need you to know that what I witnessed tonight was absolutely disgraceful. What do you mean? I asked, though I suspected I knew. They didn't mention you. Not once. Not during the ceremony, not during the toasts, not during any of the speeches. Patricia gave this long talk about what a wonderful job she did raising Melissa. Victoria talked about family legacy and bloodlines. Thornton's father welcomed Melissa to their family, but no one, and I mean no one, acknowledged that you existed. James's voice was angry in a way I rarely heard. Half the people there had no idea Melissa even had a father, and the ones who knew you, the ones who knew that you paid for that entire circus, they were whispering about it, about how inappropriate it was, how classless. Trevor, I've known you for 20 years, and I've never been more proud to be your friend than I am right now, for having the dignity to not subject yourself to that humiliation. I appreciate that, James, more than you know. There's going to be some changes coming soon, big changes, about the firm, about my marriage, about everything. I'll explain it all when the time is right, but I wanted you to know that this, all of this, it's going to lead somewhere better. James was quiet for a moment. Whatever you need, I've got your back. Always, that's what brothers do. After we hung up, I sat with that thought. Brothers, real family. The people who show up for you not because of what you can give them, but because of who you are. I'd been so focused on my biological family that I'd failed to appreciate the family I'd chosen, the people like James and Richard and Margaret, who'd proven their loyalty over years of friendship and partnership. The night of the wedding, I didn't go home. I stayed at my office, sleeping on the couch in my private suite. I didn't want to see Patricia, didn't want to hear about how magical the wedding was, how perfect everything turned out. I just wanted to wait for Monday, for the moment when everything would change. Sunday morning, I woke early and went for a long walk along the waterfront, the same waterfront where Melissa's wedding had been held the night before. The venue was being cleaned up, workers taking down the elaborate decorations, folding chairs, dismantling the altar. All that money, all that effort, for one night. And now it was just debris being loaded into trucks. I thought about Catherine's article, which would be published in a few hours in the Sunday paper. I thought about the divorce papers that would be filed tomorrow. I thought about Melissa and Patricia discovering that I'd changed my will, that they'd been cut off completely. And I felt nothing but that cold, clear certainty. They'd made their choice. Now they'd live with the consequences. The article dropped online at 6 a.m. Sunday, before the print edition hit the stands. Catherine had titled it, "The Price of Refinement: How Old Money Exploits New while Maintaining Class Boundaries." It was powerful, well-written, and absolutely devastating. She'd used my story as the framework, but she'd also interviewed sociologists, economists, and other people who'd experienced similar situations. She'd built a compelling argument about how inherited wealth creates a system that extracts resources from those who actually create value, while simultaneously demeaning them for not having been born into money. The article didn't name Melissa, Patricia, or Thornton directly. It used pseudonyms. But anyone who knew us, anyone who moved in those social circles, would recognize the story immediately. The details were too specific, too recent. The wedding had been one of the most talked about social events of the season. People would know. By 8 a.m, my phone started ringing. I ignored it. By 9, I had over 50 missed calls and more than 100 texts. I glanced at a few. Some were from Patricia, increasingly frantic. Some were from Melissa, angry and accusatory. Some were from people I barely knew, offering sympathy or outrage or just wanting to gossip. I ignored all of them. At 10 a.m, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "This is Trevor." "Mr. Trevor, this is Jonathan Ashworth, Thornton's father. I was wondering if we might have a conversation." I raised my eyebrows. This was unexpected. "Of course. What can I do for you?" There was a pause, and when Jonathan spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. "I've just read a rather disturbing article in the newspaper. While it doesn't mention names, I believe it may be referencing yesterday's wedding, my son's wedding." I waited, saying nothing. "Mr. Trevor," continued Jonathan, "I want you to understand that I had no knowledge of the situation described in this article. I was not aware that you had been excluded from the ceremony, nor was I aware of the extent of your financial contributions to the event. If I had known, I would have intervened. This is not how the Ashworth family conducts itself." "Really?" I said quietly. "Because your mother was one of the primary people pushing for my exclusion. She and my wife and my mother-in-law made the decision together." Another pause. "My mother, Jonathan said carefully, has very fixed ideas about social propriety. But she does not speak for me or for my branch of the family. What happened yesterday was inappropriate and disrespectful, and I want you to know that I do not condone it. I appreciate you saying that, I replied, but I'm curious why you're calling me now, after the wedding, after the article, rather than before when you could have actually done something about the situation. Jonathan cleared his throat. That's fair. The truth is, I wasn't paying close enough attention to the planning process. I assumed everything was being handled properly. That's my failure, and I apologize for it. I'm calling now because I'd like to make amends if possible. Perhaps we could meet for lunch this week, discuss how to move forward in a way that repairs these family relationships. I had to give him credit. He was smooth. But I'd been dealing with smooth talkers my entire career. I know what you're really asking, I said. You want to know if I'm planning to cause more problems. You're worried about the social fallout from that article, about how it makes your family look. You want to do damage control. Mr. Trevor, Jonathan said, his voice hardening slightly, I'm trying to extend an olive branch here. Whatever grievances you have with your wife or daughter, they don't need to affect the broader family relationships. Surely we can find a civilized solution that doesn't involve public spectacles in the media. There it was, the real reason for the call. He wasn't concerned about me or my feelings. He was concerned about his family's reputation. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. Tomorrow morning I'm filing for divorce from Patricia. I've already changed my will to exclude both her and Melissa. I'm removing myself entirely from this family, your family and mine. The article is just the beginning. People need to understand how this system works, how people like you exploit people like me while looking down on us. Jonathan's voice went cold. That sounds like a threat. It's not a threat, I replied. It's information. I'm not trying to destroy anyone. I'm simply removing my support and telling the truth about what happened. If that causes problems for you, maybe you should examine why the truth is so damaging. I hung up before he could respond. The rest of Sunday was chaos. Patricia came home in the afternoon, her face red and blotchy from crying. She found me in my office, where I'd finally returned, and she screamed at me for 20 minutes straight. How could I do this? How could I humiliate her and Melissa like this? How could I be so selfish and vindictive? Didn't I understand that this article would ruin their social standing? Didn't I care about my own daughter's happiness? I let her scream. I didn't interrupt, didn't argue, didn't defend myself. I just sat there and let her exhaust herself. When she finally ran out of steam, I spoke quietly. Are you finished? She glared at me through her tears. You're a monster. You've destroyed everything. No, Patricia, I said. I didn't destroy anything. You did. You and Melissa and your entire family. You took everything I built, everything I provided, and you threw me away because I wasn't good enough for you. Because I actually worked for my money instead of inheriting it. Because I came from a normal family instead of an aristocratic one. That's not true, she protested weakly. Isn't it? Then explain to me why I wasn't invited to my own daughter's wedding. Explain to me why there wasn't even an empty chair with my name on it. Explain to me how I'm supposed to feel valued and loved when I've been literally erased from the family while still being expected to pay for everything. Patricia looked away. Melissa said you understood. She said you agreed it was better this way. I agreed not to fight about it, I corrected. That's not the same as understanding or approving. And now I'm doing something I should have done years ago. I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing my dignity. I'm choosing to stop funding people who see me as nothing more than a bank account. What does that mean? Patricia asked, and I could hear the fear in her voice. It means, I said, that tomorrow I'm filing for divorce. It means I've changed my will. It means the gravy train has reached its final stop. You and Melissa are going to have to figure out how to maintain your refined lifestyle on your own. Patricia's face went white. You can't do that. We have an agreement. We have a prenup, I corrected, which heavily favors me, especially in cases of financial misconduct. And my lawyer has documented every excessive expenditure, every gift, every payment. You've taken $12.7 million from me over the past 10 years, Patricia. That's not a marriage. That's embezzlement with better PR. She started crying again, but this time they seemed like real tears, not just angry ones. Trevor, please. We can fix this. We can work this out. It's too late, I said. You made your choice. You chose status over substance, appearance over authenticity, refinement over respect, and now you get to live with that choice without my financial support. I stood up. I'm staying in a hotel tonight and for the foreseeable future. My attorney will be in touch tomorrow. Please don't contact me unless it's through legal channels. I walked past her and left my own house, the house I'd designed, the house I'd built, and I didn't look back. Monday morning arrived, and with it, the next phase of the plan. Richard filed the divorce papers at 9 in the morning. By noon, Patricia had been served. The papers outlined everything: the financial exploitation, the social manipulation, the emotional abuse. Richard had built an airtight case for why I should retain the majority of my assets despite the length of the marriage. At 1 in the afternoon, Melissa called. I almost didn't answer, but I decided I owed her one final conversation. "Dad," she said, and her voice was shaking. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done a long time ago," I replied, standing up for myself. "You're divorcing Mom? You're cutting me out of your will? How could you do this to us?" "How could I?" I repeated slowly. "Melissa, do you hear yourself? You excluded me from your wedding. You erased me from your family. You took millions of dollars from me while treating me like I was an embarrassment. And you're asking how I could do this to you? But you're my father," she said. Like that explained everything. "Exactly," I said. "I'm your father. The man who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who gave you every opportunity. And you repaid that by deciding I wasn't good enough to attend your wedding. You made it very clear what you think of me, Melissa. Now I'm simply accepting your evaluation and acting accordingly." She was crying now. "I didn't mean it like that. You know I love you. Do I? Because love isn't just words, Melissa. Love is actions. Love is showing up. Love is valuing someone for who they are, not what they can give you. And your actions have made it very clear that you don't love me. You love my money. There's a difference." "That's not fair," she protested. "Life isn't fair," I replied. "If it were, children wouldn't disown their parents while still expecting those parents to fund their lives. But here we are. Goodbye, Melissa. I hope your marriage brings you all the happiness and refinement you were looking for." I hung up and blocked her number. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, but it was necessary. You can't heal a wound if you keep tearing it open. Over the next few weeks, the fallout continued. Catherine's article had been picked up by national outlets, and suddenly everyone was talking about the class dynamics it highlighted. I received interview requests from major news networks, podcasts, magazines. I declined most of them, but I did a few carefully selected appearances where I could control the narrative and protect my privacy, while still making the larger point about systemic inequality. The social consequences for Patricia, Melissa, and the Ashworth family were significant. People in their circles were divided. Some rallied around them, insisting that I was bitter and vindictive, that I was making a mountain out of a molehill. But others, especially those who'd always felt like outsiders in old money circles, saw the story for what it was. They started sharing their own experiences of being exploited or looked down upon by inherited wealth families. Victoria, my former mother-in-law, actually gave an interview defending their actions. She claimed that wedding planning was complicated and that sometimes difficult decisions had to be made for the greater good of the event. She suggested that I was being overly sensitive and that perhaps I wasn't emotionally mature enough to understand sophisticated social dynamics. The interview backfired spectacularly. People were outraged by her cold, elitist attitude, and several major charities quietly removed her from their boards. Thornton's family tried to distance themselves from the controversy, but it was too late. Jonathan's phone call to me had been leaked to the press, probably by someone in his own family trying to show they'd attempted damage control, and it made them look calculated and insincere. Their business interests suffered, partnerships were reconsidered, and suddenly the Ashworth name wasn't quite as golden as it had been. The divorce proceedings moved forward quickly. Patricia tried to fight for a 50-50 split, but Richard's documentation was overwhelming. The judge could see clearly that I'd been financially exploited, and while Patricia would still receive a settlement, it was far less than she'd expected. She'd have enough to live comfortably, but not enough to maintain the extravagant lifestyle she'd become accustomed to. The house, my house, was sold. I didn't want to live there anymore. Too many memories of a family that had never really existed. The proceeds were split according to the divorce settlement, and I used my portion to purchase a smaller, more modern penthouse downtown. I designed it myself, of course, and it was perfect. Minimalist, functional, beautiful, a space that was entirely mine. As for Melissa, I heard through mutual acquaintances that her marriage was already showing cracks. Apparently, Thornton's trust fund wasn't as unlimited as she'd believed, and without my financial support, they were discovering that maintaining an upper-class lifestyle was expensive. They'd had to sell the condo I'd bought her and move into a smaller apartment. She'd taken a job, her first real job ever, and was apparently struggling with the reality of actually having to work for a living. I felt a twinge of sympathy, but only a twinge. She'd made her choices. She'd decided that status and refinement were more important than family and character. Now she was learning what those choices actually cost. 6 months after the wedding, I received a letter. Not an email, not a text, but an actual handwritten letter. It was from Melissa. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was long, several pages of cramped handwriting. She apologized, sort of. She said she'd been wrong, that she'd let other people influence her decisions, that she'd been caught up in trying to impress Thornton's family. She said she missed me, that she realized now how much I'd done for her, how ungrateful she'd been. She asked if we could talk, if there was any way to repair our relationship. I read the letter twice, looking for sincerity, looking for real understanding of what she'd done, but between the lines, I could see what she was really saying. She was struggling financially. Her marriage was difficult. Her life wasn't what she'd expected, and she wanted her father back, not because she loved me, but because she needed me. Again, I wrote back. Just a brief note. Melissa, I appreciate your letter, but I don't think you understand what you're actually apologizing for. You're not sorry for hurting me. You're sorry that your life is harder without my money. Those are two very different things. Until you can genuinely understand the difference, there's nothing to discuss. I wish you well, but I'm not interested in resuming a relationship based on your need rather than genuine love and respect. I sent the letter and felt a sense of closure. Not happiness exactly, but peace. I'd done what I needed to do. I'd stood up for myself, protected my dignity, and removed myself from a toxic situation. That was enough. The architectural firm buyout with James was completed, and I found myself with more money than I'd ever need. I threw myself into pro bono work, designing community centers, affordable housing projects, schools in underfunded districts. I established a scholarship fund for students from working-class backgrounds who wanted to study architecture or design. I poured my energy into creating things that actually mattered, that actually helped people. I dated cautiously at first, then with more confidence. I met a woman named Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a professor of urban planning at the local university. She was brilliant, passionate about social justice, and completely unimpressed by wealth or status. She valued ideas, integrity, hard work. When I told her my story, she didn't judge or pity me. She just nodded and said, "Family is complicated. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away." We've been together for 8 months now, and it's different from my marriage to Patricia in every way. It's based on mutual respect, shared values, genuine partnership. Elena doesn't want my money. She has her own career and financial independence. She wants my time, my thoughts, my companionship. She wants me, not what I can provide. A year after the wedding, I received an invitation in the mail. It was from a charity I'd never heard of, asking me to speak at their fundraising gala about second chances and personal reinvention. I almost declined. I'm not much for public speaking, but then I looked up the charity. It focused on helping people escape financially abusive relationships. I accepted the invitation. The gala was small, intimate, nothing like the extravagant events Patricia used to drag me to. The people there were genuine, caring, actually interested in making a difference. I gave my speech, talking about how financial abuse isn't always obvious, how it can happen even in wealthy families, how sometimes the people who exploit you most are the ones closest to you. I talked about recognizing your own worth, independent of what you can provide others. I talked about the courage it takes to walk away from people you love when they don't love you back. The response was overwhelming. People came up to me afterward, sharing their own stories, thanking me for speaking openly about something so often hidden. Several people asked if I'd be willing to do more speaking engagements. I agreed, and over the following months I became something I never expected, an advocate. Not famous exactly, but known in certain circles as someone who'd survived financial and emotional exploitation and come out stronger. I started writing too, essays about class and wealth and family dynamics. Catherine helped me place them in reputable publications. I wasn't trying to punish Patricia or Melissa anymore. That phase had passed. I was trying to help other people recognize these patterns in their own lives, to give them permission to prioritize their own dignity and well-being. 18 months after the wedding, Patricia reached out through her lawyer. She wanted to talk, just a conversation, no legal implications. I agreed, curious about what she wanted to say. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. She looked different, older somehow, less polished. Her clothes were still nice, but not designer. Her hair was styled, but not salon fresh. She looked like a normal person instead of a socialite, and somehow that made her more human. We sat across from each other, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. Then Patricia said quietly, "I've been in therapy. My therapist suggested I reach out to make amends, not to ask for anything, just to acknowledge what I did wrong. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand what I put you through, how I used you, how I let other people's opinions matter more than your feelings." I sipped my coffee, waiting for the catch. There wasn't one. Patricia continued, voice shaking slightly. I was raised to believe that status was everything. That being part of the right families, going to the right events, maintaining the right image, that was what mattered. My mother drilled that into me from childhood. I thought I was climbing, achieving something. I didn't realize I was sacrificing everything real for something empty. She looked at me with genuine sadness. "You were a good husband, Trevor. You were faithful, hard-working, generous. You gave me everything I asked for and more. And I repaid that by making you feel less than, by treating you like you weren't good enough because you earned your money instead of inheriting it. That was wrong. That was cruel. And I'm sorry." I studied her face, looking for manipulation, for ulterior motives. But I only saw regret. "Patricia," I said slowly, "I appreciate you saying that. I really do. But I need you to understand something. I can forgive what you did to me. I'm working on that. But I can't forgive what you taught Melissa. You raised our daughter to value the wrong things, to judge people by their pedigree instead of their character. That's a legacy that's going to follow her for the rest of her life." Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face now. "I know. I see it. Her marriage is falling apart. Thornton is exactly the kind of man I taught her to value, wealthy, connected, refined, and he's also selfish, unfaithful, and emotionally abusive. She's miserable, but she won't leave because she's terrified of social judgment. I created that. I made her believe that appearances matter more than happiness." "How is she?" I asked, despite myself. "She's struggling," Patricia admitted. "Financially, emotionally, in every way. She wants to reach out to you, but she's ashamed. She knows she destroyed your relationship and she doesn't know how to fix it." "I don't know if it can be fixed," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, if she does the work Patricia is doing, the real internal work of examining her values and choices. But I can't be the one to reach out. She needs to figure out who she is and what she believes independent of my money and support." Patricia nodded. "I understand. I'm not asking you to reconcile with her. I'm just letting you know that she's paying for her choices and she knows it." We sat in silence for a few more minutes, then Patricia stood up. "Thank you for meeting with me. I know I don't deserve your time or consideration. I hope you're happy, Trevor. You deserve happiness." I watched her leave and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but release. I was letting go of the anger, the bitterness, the need for them to suffer. They were suffering, that was clear. But more importantly, I wasn't anymore. 2 years after the wedding that I wasn't allowed to attend, I was invited to give the keynote speech at an architecture conference. The theme was designing for social equity, creating spaces that serve communities rather than just showcasing wealth. It was perfect for me, given the direction my work had taken. I accepted the invitation and spent weeks preparing my remarks. The night of the speech, the conference hall was packed. Hundreds of architects, designers, urban planners, all gathered to hear about creating more equitable built environments. I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, and I felt genuinely happy. This was my community now. People who valued innovation over inheritance, creativity over credentials, impact over image. I gave my speech, talking about my journey from commercial architecture serving wealthy clients to community-focused design, serving those who actually needed it. I talked about how our profession has a responsibility to create beautiful, functional spaces for everyone, not just those who can afford premium prices. I talked about measuring success not by how much we earn, but by how much we contribute. The response was enthusiastic, genuine. After the speech, dozens of people wanted to talk, to share ideas, to collaborate on projects. I was networking with a group of young architects when I saw her, Melissa. She was standing at the edge of the crowd, watching me. She looked so different from the bride I'd last seen in wedding photos 2 years ago. She was thinner, more tired. Her clothes were professional but basic. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked like someone who'd been humbled by life. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw her swallow hard. She didn't approach me, didn't try to interrupt. She just stood there, watching, and I could see everything on her face. Regret, sadness, pride too, I think. Pride in what I'd become, what I was doing. For a moment I considered walking over to her, but I didn't. I wasn't ready, and more importantly, she needed to figure out her own path. If she wanted a relationship with me, she needed to earn it. Not with money or status or grand gestures, but with genuine change, with a fundamental shift in her values and priorities. I turned back to my conversation with the young architects, and when I looked again a few minutes later, Melissa was gone. I felt a pang of sadness, but also clarity. This was my life now. This work, these people, this purpose. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. 3 years after the wedding, I received another letter from Melissa. This one was different from the first. No excuses, no self-pity, just a simple, direct acknowledgement of what she'd done and how wrong it was. She told me she'd left Thornton, finally found the courage to end a marriage that was destroying her. She'd moved to another city, taken a job in nonprofit management, was living a modest life far from the social circles that had once meant everything to her. She wrote that she was in therapy, working through the toxic beliefs she'd been raised with. She said she was learning to value people for their character rather than their credentials, their kindness rather than their connections. She said she understood now why I'd walked away, and she didn't blame me. She said she was proud of the work I was doing, that she read every article I published, attended every public talk she could find online, and then, at the end of the letter, she wrote something that made me cry for the first time since this whole situation started. Dad, I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I just wanted you to know that everything you tried to teach me about integrity, compassion, hard work, and human dignity, I finally understand it now. It took losing everything to see what actually mattered. I hope someday, maybe years from now, we might be able to have coffee. Not as father and daughter trying to reclaim what we lost, but as two people who respect each other for who they actually are. Until then, I'll keep working on becoming someone worthy of your respect. I love you, and I'm sorry. I read that letter a dozen times. I showed it to Elena, who read it carefully and then looked at me with understanding. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to reach out immediately. Part of me thinks it's too soon, that she needs more time to prove this change is real. Elena nodded. There's no rush. You get to decide what's right for you on your timeline. That's what boundaries are about. She's not entitled to your forgiveness or your presence, even if she's changed. But if and when you're ready, the door can open. You get to control that. I kept the letter, but I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to wait, to see if this change was sustainable. I wanted to make sure that if I did reconnect with my daughter, it would be genuine, built on a new foundation, rather than the ruins of the old one. 6 months later, I saw a news article that caught my attention. It was about a new nonprofit working to provide affordable housing for working families. The executive director quoted in the article was Melissa. She was using her business degree, the one I'd paid for, to actually help people. She was creating something meaningful. I showed the article to Elena. She smiled. Looks like she meant what she said in her letter. What do you think? I think, I said slowly, that maybe it's time for coffee. I wrote back to Melissa. Just a brief note similar to how I'd started this journey years ago with simple, clear communication. Melissa, I received your letter and I've been thinking about it. I saw the article about your work with the housing nonprofit. I'm proud of what you're doing. If you're still interested in having coffee, I'd like that. Not to fix everything immediately, but to start a conversation. Let me know when and where. She responded within an hour. Yes, please. Anytime, anywhere. Just tell me when. We met 2 weeks later at a small cafe, the same one where I'd met with Patricia. Neutral territory, casual atmosphere. When Melissa walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She wasn't just physically different, though she was. She carried herself differently. Less arrogance, more humility. She looked me in the eye when she approached, not with entitlement but with genuine nervousness. We sat down, ordered coffee, and for a moment, just looked at each other. Then Melissa spoke. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either, I admitted. But I saw what you're doing with the housing nonprofit. That's real work, meaningful work. She nodded. It's the first thing I've done in my life that actually matters. The first thing I've done that helps people instead of just impressing them. It's hard, and the pay is terrible compared to what I thought I'd be making at this point in my life. But I wake up every morning feeling like I have a purpose. We talked for 2 hours. Not about the wedding, not about the past, but about who we were now. She told me about leaving Thornton, about how terrifying it was to walk away from security and status. She told me about her therapy, about unpacking all the toxic beliefs she'd internalized from Patricia and Victoria. She told me about her work, about the family she was helping, about learning to measure success by impact rather than income. I told her about my work too, about the community projects I was designing, about Elena, about speaking and writing on financial abuse and class dynamics. I told her about finding purpose in service rather than profit, and somewhere in that conversation, I saw glimpses of the daughter I remembered from long ago, before the wealth and status corrupted everything. The girl who used to help me in my office, fascinated by how buildings could shape communities. At the end of our coffee, Melissa looked at me seriously. Dad, I know I can't undo what I did. I know that saying sorry isn't enough, that it doesn't erase the pain I caused you. I'm not asking you to forget or to instantly trust me again. I'm just asking if, maybe, we could do this again sometime. Keep talking, keep getting to know each other as we are now, not as we were. I considered her request carefully, then I nodded. I'd like that. But Melissa, I need you to understand something. If we're going to rebuild any kind of relationship, it has to be built on honesty and mutual respect. No more valuing status over character. No more judging people by their background. No more exploitation disguised as family obligation. She met my eyes steadily. I understand, and I agree. Those days are over for me. I've seen where that path leads, and I never want to go back. We started meeting once a month for coffee. Just conversation. No expectations, no pressure. Sometimes we talked about work, sometimes about life, sometimes about difficult topics from the past. Slowly, carefully, we began to build something new. Not the father-daughter relationship we'd had before, that was gone forever, but something more honest, more equal, more real. Elena met Melissa about 6 months into our renewed relationship. I was nervous about it, worried about how they'd interact. But Elena, with her usual warmth and directness, simply treated Melissa as a person, not as my estranged daughter with baggage. They talked about urban planning and affordable housing, finding common ground in their shared passion for social equity. Afterward, Elena told me, she's doing the work. Real change is possible, Trevor. It's rare, but it's possible. 4 years after the wedding, Melissa invited me to an event. Her nonprofit was opening a new affordable housing complex, and she wanted me there for the ribbon cutting. Not as a donor, she made clear, just as her father. I attended with Elena, and I watched my daughter give a speech about community, dignity, and the right of every family to have a safe, decent place to live. I watched her interact with the families moving into the complex, treating them with genuine respect and care. After the ceremony, she introduced me to her colleagues, and she said something that made my heart swell. This is my father, Trevor. He's an architect who taught me that buildings should serve people, not egos. Everything I know about designing for community instead of profit, I learned from watching him work. It wasn't entirely true, she'd learned most of it on her own after rejecting everything I'd tried to teach her, but the sentiment was real, and that mattered. As Elena and I drove home that evening, she took my hand. "You know what I think?" she said. "I think you got your revenge after all. Not the kind you planned, but something better." I looked at her, curious. "What do you mean?" "You showed them that their values were empty. You proved that character matters more than credentials. You built a life of meaning and purpose while they struggled with the consequences of their choices. And now, your daughter is trying to follow your example. That's the ultimate revenge, making them realize what they lost." She was right. I'd set out to punish Patricia and Melissa for their betrayal, to make them understand what they'd done, and in a way, I'd succeeded. But somewhere along the journey, it had stopped being about revenge and started being about reclamation, reclaiming my dignity, my purpose, my life. I'd built something better than what I'd lost, and that was worth more than any punishment I could have inflicted. Patricia and I never reconciled, and that was okay. She'd apologized and I'd accepted the apology, but we both understood that our relationship was over. She'd moved to a smaller city, found work as an event planner, built a modest life without the social status she'd once craved. I heard through Melissa that Patricia was happier now, more authentic. That was good. I wanted her to be okay, just not in my life. Victoria passed away a year after the wedding, and I didn't attend the funeral. I'd moved past anger, but I saw no reason to pretend to mourn someone who'd never respected me. Her legacy lived on in the social circles she'd dominated, but those circles were slowly changing, becoming more inclusive, less obsessed with pedigree, and more interested in purpose. As for Thornton, I heard he'd remarried quickly after divorcing Melissa, another woman from an old money family, another trophy wife to maintain his image. I felt sorry for her, whoever she was. But that wasn't my concern anymore. 5 years after the wedding, on a random Tuesday evening, Melissa called me. Not our scheduled monthly coffee, just a spontaneous call. "Dad," she said, and I could hear nervousness in her voice. "I wanted to tell you something. I'm getting married again." My heart clenched. "To whom?" "His name is Marcus. He's a teacher at an inner-city school. He grew up in foster care, put himself through college, dedicates his life to helping kids who come from difficult backgrounds. He's kind, genuine, and he makes me laugh. I'm not marrying him for status or money or to impress anyone. I'm marrying him because I love him, because he's a good person, because he makes me want to be a better person." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Melissa, that's wonderful. I'm happy for you." There was a pause, then she said quietly, "I'd like you to walk me down the aisle, if you're willing. This time I want my father at my wedding, not funding it, not making it possible, just being there, being my dad." I had to clear my throat before I could speak. "I'd be honored. We're keeping it small," she continued. "Just close friends and family, Marcus's foster parents, a few colleagues, people who actually matter to us. No social climbing, no impressing anyone. Just a celebration of two people who found each other." "That sounds perfect," I said. "When is it?" "In 3 months. It's going to be at the community center you designed in the Riverside neighborhood, the one that started your whole transition to community-focused work. We're having it there because that building represents everything we believe in now. Service, community, purpose." I couldn't speak for a moment, too overwhelmed by emotion. Melissa continued, "I know I can't make up for the past. I can't give you back the moments I stole, the pain I caused, but I want you to know that every day, I try to be the daughter you deserve to have, the daughter you tried to raise before I lost my way. You're doing more than trying," I said. "You're succeeding." 3 months later, I stood in the community center I'd designed, wearing a simple suit, waiting to walk my daughter down an aisle decorated with wildflowers and handmade decorations. Elena stood with the small group of guests, smiling at me with love and pride. Melissa appeared in a simple white dress, nothing like the $80,000 gown from her first wedding. This dress probably cost a few $100s, and she looked more beautiful than I'd ever seen her. She took my arm and we walked together toward Marcus, a young man with kind eyes and a genuine smile. As we walked, Melissa whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for not giving up on me, for being patient, for showing me what really matters." I squeezed her arm gently. "Thank you for finding your way back. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt, and perfect. When the officiant asked who gives this woman in marriage, I said clearly, her mother and I do, with love and blessing. It was the truth. Patricia had sent her blessing even though she wasn't attending, respecting that this was Melissa's day to move forward, not backward. The reception was held in the same community center, catered by a local restaurant that employed formerly incarcerated individuals, giving them a second chance. The music was provided by Marcus's students, a diverse group of kids who performed with joy and enthusiasm. There was no champagne crisis, no last-minute drama, no social maneuvering, just people celebrating love. During the reception, Melissa gave a toast. She thanked Marcus for showing her what real love looked like. She thanked his foster parents for raising such an incredible man. And then she looked at me. "And I want to thank my father," she said, her voice shaking slightly. 5 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I let status and image and other people's opinions convince me to exclude the most important person from my wedding. My dad, the man who sacrificed everything for me, who loved me unconditionally, who tried to teach me values I was too blind and arrogant to see. She wiped tears from her eyes. He would have been justified in never speaking to me again. Instead, he gave me the space to find myself, to learn from my mistakes, to become someone better. Dad, I know I can't change the past, but I hope that having you here today, being part of this celebration of real love and real values, is a small step toward making things right. You're the best man I know, and I'm grateful every day that you're my father. The room erupted in applause, and I stood to hug my daughter, both of us crying now. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore, or revenge, or justice. It was about two people who'd lost each other finding their way back, changed and humbled by the journey. Later that evening, as Elena and I danced to music played by Marcus's students, she said, "You know what the best part of this story is?" "What?" I asked. "You won. Not by destroying them, not by making them suffer, but by becoming someone so genuinely good that even the people who betrayed you wanted to be better. That's real power, Trevor. That's real revenge." I thought about that as I looked around the room. Melissa laughing with Marcus, their love obvious and pure. The students performing with pride and joy. The families from the community center enjoying the celebration. Elena in my arms, my partner in building a meaningful life. This was my revenge. Not the calculated destruction I'd planned 5 years ago, though that had been necessary too. But this redemption, this transformation, this proof that real values triumph over empty status. I'd been excluded from a $1 million wedding designed to impress people who didn't matter. And now I was the honored guest at a modest celebration that actually meant something. Patricia had been right in her therapy session all those years ago. I was a good man. I'd always been a good man. And by walking away, by refusing to accept being treated as less than, by building a life based on purpose rather than approval, I'd proven it, not just to Patricia and Melissa, but to myself. As the reception wound down and guests began to leave, Melissa and Marcus came over to say goodbye before heading to their honeymoon, a camping trip in a national park, no expensive European vacation required. "Dad," Melissa said, hugging me tight, "thank you for being here. Thank you for giving me another chance. Thank you for being you." I held her close. "Thank you for doing the hard work of changing. I'm proud of you." After they left, Elena and I stayed to help clean up. As we stacked chairs and took down decorations, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the cold calculation of my initial revenge, the slow healing, the building of new purpose, the unexpected redemption. Someone had told me 5 years ago when Melissa said I couldn't attend her wedding, that I'd eventually be here, walking her down the aisle at a second marriage that actually mattered. I wouldn't have believed them. I'd been too angry, too hurt, too focused on punishment. But life has a way of surprising you. People can change if they're willing to do the work. Relationships can be rebuilt, not as they were, but as something new and possibly better. And revenge, real revenge, isn't about destruction. It's about refusing to let other people's judgment define your worth. It's about building a life so authentic and meaningful that it exposes the emptiness of what you left behind. 6 years after the wedding, I wasn't allowed to attend. I was invited to give the commencement speech at my alma mater's architecture school. It was a full-circle moment, speaking to young architects about to enter the profession I'd dedicated my life to. I stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of graduates in their caps and gowns, and I told them my story. Not all of it, not the painful personal details, but the essential truth. I told them about starting my career focused on impressive buildings for wealthy clients, about measuring success by profit and prestige. I told them about a moment of reckoning that forced me to reevaluate everything. And I told them about discovering that the most meaningful architecture serves the people who need it most, that the most satisfying success comes from impact rather than income. Design for people, not for portfolios, I told them. Build for communities, not for credentials. Measure your worth by the lives you improve, not by the status you achieve. Because at the end of your career, no one's going to remember the expensive buildings you designed for people who already had everything. They're going to remember the spaces you created that gave dignity, opportunity, and hope to people who needed it. The graduates gave me a standing ovation, and afterward, dozens of them wanted to talk, inspired by the idea of purpose-driven architecture. I gave them my contact information, offered to mentor anyone interested in community-focused design. These young architects, just starting out, were my real legacy. Not the buildings I'd designed, though I was proud of those, but the values I was passing on, the idea that success means service, that wealth should create opportunity for others, that character matters more than credentials. That evening, I had dinner with Elena, Melissa, and Marcus, 4 people who'd built authentic lives based on real values. We laughed, shared stories, made plans for the future. Melissa told us about her nonprofit's expansion plans, Marcus about a student who'd just gotten accepted to college, the first in his family. Elena talked about her research on equitable urban development, and I listened, grateful for this family I'd chosen, and that had chosen me back. As we said goodnight, Melissa hugged me one more time. "Dad," she said softly, "I hope you know that you saved my life. When you walked away, when you refused to keep enabling my toxic behavior, you forced me to look at who I'd become. I hated you for it at first, but it was the greatest gift you ever gave me." I kissed her forehead. "You saved yourself, Melissa. I just got out of the way and let you do it." Driving home with Elena that night, I thought about the question she'd asked me years ago. What kind of revenge did I want? At the time, I'd wanted to punish, to expose, to make them suffer. And I had done some of that necessarily to protect myself and establish boundaries. But the real revenge, the lasting revenge, was this: building a life so genuine that it highlighted the emptiness of what I'd left behind. Becoming so secure in my own worth that their judgment no longer mattered, and most unexpectedly, inspiring change in the people who'd hurt me, not through punishment, but through example. 7 years after the wedding I wasn't allowed to attend, I received an award from the National Community Development Association for my contributions to affordable housing design. It was a small ceremony, nothing like the society events Patricia used to drag me to. Just professionals who dedicated their lives to serving communities, recognizing one of their own. Melissa and Marcus attended, as did Elena, James and his family, Richard, Margaret, Catherine, and dozens of other people who'd been part of my journey. People who valued substance over style, impact over image. When I accepted the award, I gave a brief speech. 7 years ago, I said, I lost something I thought was essential to my happiness. My family, or at least my illusion of family. I thought that loss would destroy me. Instead, it freed me. It forced me to figure out who I was without other people's approval, what I valued without other people's expectations, how to measure success without other people's standards. I looked out at the audience, at the faces of people doing real work in the world, and what I discovered is this: real wealth isn't money, though money is useful. Real wealth is purpose. It's waking up every morning knowing your work matters, that you're contributing to something larger than yourself. Real success isn't status, it's integrity. It's being able to look at yourself in the mirror and respect the person looking back. Real family isn't biology. It's the people who show up for you, who value you for who you are, who celebrate your character instead of your credentials. I held up the award. This means more to me than any amount of money or social status ever could, because it represents recognition from people I actually respect for work that actually matters. Thank you. The applause was genuine and warm, and as I stepped off the stage, Melissa was waiting. She hugged me fiercely. "I'm so proud of you, Dad. I'm proud to be your daughter." And I realized that this right here was the ending I'd needed but couldn't have imagined 7 years ago. Not reconciliation that pretended nothing had happened. Not forgiveness that excused the inexcusable. But transformation, growth, a relationship rebuilt on a foundation of authenticity instead of obligation. That night, Elena and I sat on our balcony, looking out at the city lights. She took my hand. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "The way it all happened? The pain you had to go through?" I thought about it honestly. Parts of it, yes. I regret that my daughter had to hurt me so badly before she could learn what mattered. I regret the years we lost. I regret that Patricia and I couldn't have built something real from the beginning. But do I regret standing up for myself, walking away from exploitation, building a life based on my own values? No, never. Elena squeezed my hand. "You know what I think you should do? Write about it. The whole story from beginning to end. Not as revenge, but as a roadmap for other people in similar situations. Show them that it's possible to survive betrayal, to rebuild dignity, to find purpose after loss." I considered that. It would be exposing everything, making myself vulnerable in a very public way. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the final act of revenge wasn't punishment at all, but radical honesty, telling the truth so completely that it helped others recognize the truth in their own lives. So I wrote this story, the one you've been listening to, not to hurt anyone, they've all moved on and changed, but to show that financial and emotional exploitation can happen even in wealthy families, that being excluded by people you love is devastating but survivable, that rebuilding your life on authentic values is possible and ultimately more satisfying than maintaining relationships built on false foundations. If you're listening to this and you see yourself in my story, if you're the invisible bank account in someone else's life, if you're funding people who look down on you, if you're sacrificing your dignity for people who don't appreciate your sacrifice, I want you to know something. You deserve better. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not what you can provide. You deserve relationships built on mutual respect, not financial exploitation. And you have the power to walk away, to build something better, to demand the dignity you've been denied. It won't be easy. There will be pain, loss, grief for the relationships you thought you had. There will be people who call you vindictive, ungrateful, selfish. Let them. Their judgment says more about them than about you. Focus on building a life you can be proud of, surrounding yourself with people who value you authentically, and creating meaning through purpose rather than approval. The best revenge isn't destruction, it's construction. Building a life so genuine, so meaningful, so aligned with your true values that it exposes the emptiness of what you left behind. It's becoming so secure in your own worth that other people's judgment loses its power over you. It's transforming pain into purpose, betrayal into boundaries, loss into liberation. 8 years after my daughter told me I couldn't attend her wedding, after I smiled and made the calls that changed everything, I can honestly say I'm happy, not despite what happened, but in some strange way, because of it. The betrayal forced me to examine my life, my values, my choices. It pushed me to become someone better, someone more authentic, someone who measures success by impact instead of income, character instead of credentials, purpose instead of prestige. My relationship with Melissa isn't what it was, and it never will be. But in many ways, it's better. It's honest now, built on who we actually are rather than who we pretended to be. We're not bound by obligation or guilt, but by genuine care and shared values. Patricia and I will never be friends, but we've made peace. She's building her own authentic life, and I respect that from a distance. The Ashworth family faded into irrelevance in my life, which is exactly where they belong. And me? I wake up every morning next to someone who loves me for who I am. I spend my days designing buildings that serve communities and writing articles that challenge systemic inequality. I mentor young architects who want to make a difference. I speak to groups about financial abuse and the courage it takes to walk away from exploitation. I've built a family of choice, people who show up because they want to, not because they want something. I've created a legacy based on values rather than wealth, impact rather than inheritance, meaning rather than money. So when my daughter said, "You're not coming to my wedding," and I smiled and called my attorney, my accountant, my business partner, and a journalist, I wasn't just planning revenge. I was planning liberation. I was choosing myself, my dignity, my worth. I was refusing to accept being erased from my own life while still funding everyone else's. And that choice, that moment of standing up for myself, led to everything that came after. The pain, yes, but also the growth. The loss, yes, but also the rebuilding. The ending, yes, but also the new beginning. If you're facing your own moment of reckoning, your own realization that the people you love don't love you back the same way, I want you to know that it gets better. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually. You have to do the work. Set boundaries, walk away when necessary, build something new. But on the other side of that pain is freedom. On the other side of that loss is authenticity. On the other side of that betrayal is a life lived on your own terms. My daughter tried to exclude me from her wedding because I wasn't refined enough, because I earned my money instead of inheriting it, because I came from the wrong kind of family. She failed to understand that the only wrong kind of family is the kind that values status over love, credentials over character, appearance over authenticity. Now she knows better. She learned the hard way, through loss and struggle and rebuilding. But she learned, and sometimes that's the best revenge of all, not making them suffer but making them understand, making them see what they threw away and why it mattered, making them realize that character trumps credentials every single time. So this is my story, the story of how my daughter's wedding became my liberation, how betrayal became boundaries, how loss became purpose, how the worst moment of my life led to the best version of myself, and how real revenge isn't about destruction, but about construction, building a life so authentic and meaningful that it needs no defense, no justification, no approval from anyone who doesn't deserve to give it. To everyone who's ever felt less than, looked down upon, exploited by people who should have valued you, remember this: your worth isn't determined by other people's judgment. Your success isn't measured by their standards. Your happiness doesn't require their approval. You have the power to walk away, to build better, to demand the dignity you deserve. Use that power. Choose yourself. And when people ask how you could walk away from family, from relationships, from people you loved, smile. Just smile, because you'll know what they don't, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and ultimately for them is to refuse to participate in your own diminishment. That's the real lesson here. Not how to get revenge, but how to reclaim yourself, how to transform pain into purpose, how to build a life that doesn't need validation from people who wouldn't give it anyway, how to measure your worth by your own standards rather than someone else's prejudices. My daughter said I couldn't come to her wedding. I smiled and called the people who could help me build a better life. That's not just revenge. That's revolution. A personal revolution against exploitation, against being treated as less than, against accepting other people's limitations as your own reality. 8 years later, I can tell this story without bitterness because I've moved beyond revenge into something better. Understanding, peace, purpose. A life built on authenticity rather than approval. And if my daughter's wedding day, the day I was excluded from, was the catalyst for that transformation, then maybe it was the best gift she ever gave me. Not the gift she intended, but the gift I needed. The push to finally choose myself, to stop seeking validation from people determined to withhold it, to build something real instead of maintaining something false. So, thank you, Melissa, for saying I couldn't come to your wedding. Thank you for that moment of brutal honesty that revealed years of hidden contempt. Thank you for forcing me to see clearly what I'd been avoiding, that our relationship was based on what I could provide rather than who I was. Thank you for giving me the motivation to walk away, to rebuild, to discover what real wealth, real success, and real family actually look like. You meant to exclude me. Instead, you freed me. And that, my daughter, is the ultimate irony and the ultimate revenge. If you enjoyed this revenge story, smash that like button. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in this situation. Subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss when I upload new content.